My name is Malcolm, and I've had long COVID since October 2020. I wanted to start like my own basketball training kind of business and fitness training business. And I just got my NASM certification the night before I got sick. And I woke up and was never the same. I was getting brain fog, difficulty concentrating, some memory issues. I actually did end up getting vaccinated July 2021. The first shot was okay. The second shot is when I started developing neurological issues. Also, my fatigue and everything kind of got a little bit worse from, my initial infection. And I developed the ringing of the ears as well. I was still able to work part-time. I couldn't train people anymore, but I worked around like 3 to 4 hours a day at an after-school program. After a while, when the symptoms began to worsen, I just could not do it anymore at all. I remember I was staying with my mom at the time, and I told her, like, I can't do it. And I just started gradually getting worse and worse, and the fatigue and like the POTS like symptoms and dysautonomia and everything, to where I'm at today, where I can sometimes I could barely walk a block without my heart rate going crazy. About a year later, I went to a cardiologist, and he told me, you have long COVID. And he said, you should go to Mount Sinai. They have a long COVID clinic. They really didn't have any answers. They just confirmed that I had long COVID there. But I was just recommended, trying to take walks and download little brain games for my brain fog and whatnot. But there was nothing. There was no treatment. If I could go back in time, I would tell myself to relax. But I still try to work until I couldn't work. Then I still try to be functional, do chores, go out and do laundry and whatnot until I couldn't anymore. So I kept decreasing the levels of, how much I can function. And then every single level I kept pushing. And that's what people don't understand is it's not like one day you wake up and you're like, oh, my life is ruined. It's you try to hold on to that. There were kind of room to push through sickness and fatigue and whatnot, but it just makes everything worse. I wish we could somehow show just really how debilitating it is. Me going from a professional athlete to now I need help doing little daily things. I can't really cook for myself, do laundry. I wish we put more of an emphasis on treatment and testing. There's so much tests that show abnormal things in long COVID patients, and they're not available. I recently got results from a microclot test back, but that's because I got accepted into a study. Although there's no treatments right now, you should be able to at least at a long COVID clinic, go get the right test and see what's wrong with you. They do the standard tests and imaging and MRIs, and everything comes back normal. And, then they offer you some anxiety medicine, and you're on your way out the door. It can happen to anybody. And it's not just, the quote unquote vulnerable. It'll flip your world upside down. And what people don't realize is there are little to no resources for you in any sort of way. Financial help, medical help. I'm so grateful to have a pretty good support system, and to where I can fall back on family and they can help me. But if somebody doesn't have that, you have the potential to lose your home, become homeless. And I would never think 5 years ago, if you told me what would happen from the life I had before, to freaking not being able to walk to the store without almost passing out. We need help, and I just can't believe it's just a staggering number, the amount of people that are going through this, and they've pretty much been just left, thrown under the bus almost. I think long COVID is an emergency, and they should treat it as such and give it the proper funding.
Hi, I'm a registered nurse who's been maimed by long COVID. Before COVID, I was very healthy and active. When I went down from COVID, I went down hard. I was debilitated and unable to function on my own. 4 months later, when I was able to go back to work, I was immediately asked to step down from my role as nursing supervisor. When I asked my employer for accommodations, They simply said they didn't have any. After several meetings with HR and my manager and fighting so hard to keep my job so that I could have health insurance and make sure my family was covered, I was out of fight. The mountain was too big and there was zero support. It's abominable that someone who has been a successful nurse for over 20 years that now has a legitimate disability diagnosis under the ADA gets eye rolls and looks of disdain from their coworkers and zero support from their employer. It's a shame the medical community as a whole dismisses the very people who take care of the sickest people in town. I left that employer 1 year ago, but I find myself in a similar situation today. As I have been out sick with COVID, I've had a hospitalization, and now I have more diagnoses on my chart. My health is declining and I am forced to sell my home, the home in which I raised my kids, in the neighborhood that I grew up in. It is completely and utterly incomprehensible that there are zero FDA-approved medications for long COVID. There have been hundreds of journal articles citing that SARS-CoV-2 causes immune dysfunction, specifically depletion of the T cells. We have been screaming for the CDC, FDA, whoever, to draw a parallel between HIV/AIDS and long COVID. This must be done.
I'm in a lot of pain, have light sensitivity. That's why I'm wearing these dark tinted glasses, because my eyes hurt. I spend most of my day in this bed. There are days that I can barely get up to go to the bathroom or make a meal. I have malabsorption and can barely eat food, as long COVID has attacked my GI system. I'm one of the invisible people that people don't see when you're out running your errands. Because I'm so debilitated from long COVID, I spend my days at home Instacarting my groceries, and I only go to medical appointments if I absolutely have to go. I used to love performing, and I loved the concerts, and I loved karaoke, and I loved hanging out with my friends, and I was a foodie, and I loved going to restaurants, and I loved being outdoors. And now I haven't been outside in 2 months, not because I don't want to, but because I'll faint. I have to have a shower chair because I'm in so much physical pain. I have chest pain from doing absolutely nothing. I've tried both Western and Eastern medicine, and I'm scared to go to the doctors because they're not masking, and I have a lot of people in the communities who are high risk or still COVIDing who are getting exposed to COVID at medical appointments. Enough infections makes you high risk. Let me tell you, this is a miserable life. Protect yourself. Your health is wealth. Nothing is worth this pain. Nothing is worth this amount of suffering. And let me tell you, it's mighty expensive. It takes everything from you. It'll take not only your peace of mind and just your ability to make money, to do the things that you love, and it can cost you medical bankruptcy and make you homeless. I was a very different person. I was articulate and I loved life. And I'm trying not to cry because my entire life has changed and I'm not living. I'm just existing.
I've had long COVID for almost 2 years. I used to be a person who danced, who ran, who cycled, who did yoga, who worked really hard, who used to socialize and hang with the family and be the life of the party, and all of that is gone. I want to contribute. I want to be the person that I once was. Please help.
I have had immune deficiency, but that has been made worse by COVID. I now have lymphocytopenia, low T and B cells, as a result of COVID, which was never part of my immune deficiency before. I have new allergies. I have cognitive dysfunction. I have what is called POTS. It makes walking difficult, whereas I used to be able to do multiple dog walks a day, mow my grass, do gardening, yard work. But now multiple flights of stairs can be too much for me. I've had 6 COVID infections, 3 of which were acquired in medical settings. I had heart damage. It is suspected to be myocarditis. I will be undergoing an MRI. It is a great risk for me. I have lesions on my face. I have had chickenpox since May of 2022. I can no longer fight off even the infections in my body that were from childhood. They also think that I am fighting Epstein-Barr, and I have to be on antibiotics and antivirals and antifungals every single day. There is no course and I'm done. I must be on these medications all the time now. I have to be on medications for my heart, and I have to be on medications for my allergies, and I have to be on medications for autoimmunity, and I have to be on a special diet for autoimmunity. I can't even absorb the nutrients in my food. I have to take so many vitamins, and even then my nutrient levels, my mineral levels, they're low. In a week, I will be sick 4 years. And I have scarcely had a reprieve, and even the best off-label drugs, I feel, are only partially able to slow the tide of my deterioration. I have lost all my muscles. I can barely sleep these days, and I'm losing my ability to do even part-time work. I am not a quitter. I couldn't even afford to get the health insurance that I needed if I needed to be on disability. I am asking for the government, for independent researchers, for philanthropists, for anyone who is well, and then also those of us who are already not, to come together, and you will be saving not only the people who are already sick, but you'll be saving yourselves by investing in treating and long COVID. Because this is what I want to get back to. It is where my heart is. And my soul won't quit until my body does.
Millions are suffering, no matter the age, no matter their previous health, no matter their wealth or their status. Most are suffering in silence, are being dismissed, pushed aside, labeled by their doctors as anxious, being told that there would be some that would fall by the wayside. This needs to end. As a professional working with seniors, the effect of multiple infections on an already vulnerable population has been detrimental. The rapid cognitive decline I've witnessed is one I never thought I would see. And yet, still, we aren't focusing on any kind of prevention. Nursing homes are no longer safe. And as a parent, I'm horrified at what we are doing to our future generations, allowing them into unsafe schools, using them as hosts to spread an imaginary herd immunity that we've known from the beginning doesn't exist. Knowing what this virus does, knowing the viral persistence, knowing that it can affect every single organ in our bodies. We need workers for the economy, but we need them healthy. We need parents able to provide for their children. We need children to be healthy. We're now 5 years in, and still a lack of next-generation vaccines, antivirals, therapeutics, and any protections to provide a safe society that everyone can be a part of. This has to change. This is a national emergency, and until our leaders step up and realize this, it will only get worse. More suffering, more deaths, all from a preventable virus. So it's time to be loud.
It's time to use our voices for those who may have lost theirs, for the kids, for our grandparents, and for anyone who is out there being erased. We're stronger together, and we will only be safe when we are all safe.
Hello, and thank you for coming to LCDC and participating in this demonstration to show the U.S. government who we are and why we need urgent action. This meeting of patients and allies was forged in our desperation for prevention, research, and treatment. My name is Dara York. I'm a mother of 3, a nurse, and a vaccine-injured long COVID patient. My story is just one of maybe 45 million people in the U.S. and at least 150 million people in the world who have ongoing physical and cognitive problems related to this virus. My story includes knowledge of working as a hospital RN during the first year of the pandemic, and I was one of the first people I know to have a vaccine injury in February of 2021 from my second shot. I sought answers and treatment, but was shuffled around to over 15 doctors and specialists who had no idea what was happening to me. I had difficulty walking, weakness in limbs, swollen joints, extremely fast heart rate upon standing, and pain in my muscles, all documented. In June of 2021, I had my first COVID infection. My child brought it home, and we were careful to sanitize and keep everyone separate. Unfortunately, I was taking droplet precautions. We all know it's airborne now. My symptoms became more unmanageable, and I continued to go through gauntlets of testing. I started hearing about long COVID, and it was clear I had extreme lethargy, trouble moving around, major cognition problems that was getting worse. I was desperate for help to get well and back to my calling as a nurse. Unfortunately, I never could because I was reinfected 4 more times over the next couple years. Each reinfection worsened my illness and brought new problems. I developed more cognition problems, menstrual problems. I lost a pregnancy. Blurry vision, double vision, TMJ, GI and bladder problems that are very serious, pulmonary nodules, a cough that persisted almost 2 years, exertion intolerance, shortness of breath, muscle pain, weakness, and a greater sense of despair from lack of help from medical professionals and my government. I have paid thousands out of pocket for alternative and naturopathic treatments on top of the many doctors I have seen. On top of it all, I became immune compromised as my bone marrow isn't making enough B cells now. When I became a nurse, I knew deep in my heart I found my calling. For now, I am disconnected from what I'm truly good at. When you become a nurse, you swear to a code of ethics. This code is why I'm standing here today, why I traveled 3,000 miles in my car with my partner driving to be here. I beseech the government, health entities, and the president to please listen to us. I believe in my path as a nurse, especially fidelity to the ethical principles that I hold in my heart to decrease human suffering in every way that I can. I have not been able to easily access support, financial help, or real effective treatments due to the inaction of this government. We need resources that not only someone like me, a nurse, can access, but also resources for every man, woman, and child to be able to go to their doctor and have that doctor be educated and prepared to help all people who are needing medical, social, and financial supports. My last infection in January led to a stroke. That was a month and a half ago. I almost had to not come here. This journey has been unnecessarily long and arduous for too many like me. Far too many are now losing jobs, relationships, children, homes, and their abilities. You must take action now. This illness is causing a massive wave of disability, and people are being told it's mild, it's no big deal to be reinfected over and over. We, the people who are here today, and many who are watching from home, who have no help and cannot travel, are sick and tired for you, the government, to tell the truth. The economic losses due to disability from this pandemic is estimated to be costing $200 billion a year, according to some analysts. Because you told my fellow citizens and the world it's no big deal. It seems to me it is a winning choice for the U.S. and the world to solve this problem, get us accessible, effective treatments, and tell the truth about the many, many ways this virus is destroying lives. Above all, it's past time for the U.S. officials, doctors, nurses, and hospital organizations to remember their oaths to do no harm and protect and advocate for patients. Bring ethics back to healthcare and into community settings. Too many are being disabled and still dying from the sequelae of this pandemic. Dig deep. Remember how to show compassion and find your humanity.
We're good? Yep. 4 years ago today, I was taking my last subway ride home from work. We were not yet told to stay home, but I had notified my boss that I was going to take a few weeks off due to my increasing concerns regarding the news of a deadly virus starting to hit New York City. This was about 5 days before, This was about 5 days before New York officially shut down non-essential businesses, but it was already too late. I can still vividly remember every second of that subway ride. There was a sunset as we were going over the East River at the exact moment the first symptoms kicked in. The pain was so extreme, all I wanted to do was fall to the floor and scream. It had felt like a giant fist was reaching into my heart, wringing it out, slowly opening and closing it back down over and over. At the exact same time, I was struck by excruciating burning in my knees. The intensity was blinding. At that moment, I knew, and my life was forever changed. I was only 31 when this all started. I ate healthy, and I had been a runner since I was 11 years old. You would not expect this to happen to someone like me. I used to consider myself a high achiever, but after COVID, all I can say is I have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and never-ending tachycardia. What kills me the most is that I didn't get a choice. I wasn't given the opportunity to protect myself. That was taken away from me when the government chose to lie and try to hide a pandemic. They knew and they lied. And those lies cost me my health and what I consider my life. The lies were only just beginning. We have been witnessing an ongoing massive failure of the government to properly handle this pandemic. When I say that, I am referring to both administrations. I want to run down a quick fact check for anybody that is unsure. The pandemic is not over. SARS-CoV-2 is still here. It's airborne. It spreads through the air like smoke. If you have lungs and are currently breathing, you are at risk for contracting it. Respirators such as N95 masks and clean air measures help to reduce spread. COVID is not mild. It will never be mild. It's a SARS virus. It is not just a respiratory illness, it's a vascular disease that affects every organ and every system in your body. Wherever blood flows, SARS goes. Catching SARS-CoV-2 does not strengthen your immune system. It does the exact opposite. It damages it. SARS has more in common with HIV than a cold or a flu. SARS harms and kills children. No one is safe. Not even your pets. Mild or asymptomatic infections can still cause severe long COVID. Vaccines did not end the pandemic. They aren't even preventing transmission or long COVID. We can't keep up with the rate of mutation. Herd immunity is not attainable with this virus. Herd immunity is not going to happen. Stop trying to make it happen. Despite the immense length of precautions I've upheld this entire time, my current tally stands at 3 infections. I've experienced the full brunt of the original strain, the Delta variant, and an Omicron variant. In all honesty, for me, the Omicron was the worst. It came on harder and faster than anything before it, and it had left me with what I consider the most severe and devastating consequences after. Each infection has been unique and insidious in its own way. Each one has permanently destroyed and stolen a different part of me. After 3, I don't have much left. The damage is cumulative, it is progressive, it is degenerative. Every time you get another reinfection, your risk of a life-threatening consequence, such as a heart attack, stroke, pulmonary embolism, multiplies. This is not sustainable. The current trajectory we are on will ensure that the vast majority of the population will face serious long-term damage and early death. No one will ever be able to move forward while we are under the constant threat of reinfection and unchecked forward transmission. We need to deal with the virus. This is a novel pathogen. It must be treated as such. It is crucial that we fund pathogen-specific biomedical research immediately. I'm tired of watching every part of my body continue to break down and not be able to do anything about it because the government abandoned us. I'm tired of watching those I care about suffer and deteriorate. I've connected with many other long haulers across the globe, and they have become my friends and my family. Spoiler alert, we are not all right. People are not only not getting better, they're getting worse. Here are some of the things I've seen some other long haulers go through. Strokes, pulmonary embolisms, blood clots, brain lesions, autonomic dysfunction, losing eyesight, losing hearing, teeth falling out, hair falling out, developing new onset allergies and food intolerances, developing diabetes, autoimmune diseases, rapid onset of cancer, dementia in young people, pulmonary fibrosis, organ failure, losing the ability to walk and having to spend months relearning how, complete loss of reproductive and sexual function. Do you have any idea how many other people with long COVID I know that currently have the T-cell numbers of an AIDS patient? A lot. They don't have HIV. This was caused by SARS-CoV-2. We've had knowledge that SARS-2 can cause this kind of damage to T-cells in the immune system since at least early 2020. We've known that, and yet we've been allowing children to become serial infected with it. They're chasing variants like they're Pokemon. Why did we allow the school curriculum to become the accelerated track to lymphocytopenia? It's not okay. Children are not able to defend themselves. It's our duty to protect them. They don't have a choice either. to the government, are you completely and utterly incompetent, negligent, or intentionally allowing the mass death of your people? There's a word for that, democide. Because what you are not doing is making decisions based off science and data. You are curating lies and manipulating the illusion that the pandemic is over when it's not. On September 18th, 2023, a woman named Shafika Hudson posted this on her social media. I'm going to say again that when long COVID effects kill me, sooner than later, I need you all to recognize and say loudly what it was. Long COVID is keeping my blood pressure at 230/128 in spite of an elaborate cocktail of meds. Long COVID is shredding my kidneys. I'm not going to be alone, and this won't be considered a massive crime against humanity until we're all gone. Just tell them I fought and tried. Shafika died February 15th of this year. I want to honor her request by saying it here today. Long COVID killed Shafika. She was not the first, and she won't be the last. The government might have left us all here to die, but our numbers will only continue to grow, and we are not going down silently. It's time to stop the lies, the misinformation, and propaganda. It's time to acknowledge the severity of SARS-CoV-2 and do what we should have done all along. Listen to the science. People are losing their health, their jobs, their homes, their families, and their lives. There is no reason so many people should have to resort to crowdfunding to get medical care or to eat a meal. The government's abandoned everybody, and there are no support systems. It's time to start taking care of the people. Declare long COVID a national emergency. Next up, we have Robin Saldino, a member of the organization PAN End It, a disabled, ill, and immunocompromised-led group for organizing COVID-19 precautions. Robin has had long COVID for 2 years and is an advocate in the long COVID and COVID-cautious communities, working to connect people to free and low-cost COVID-safe resources.
I was supposed to write a speech. I wrote a couple. I'm not going to read any of them to you. I don't think that they matter as much as what I would actually like to say. I could stand here. And I could tell you my long COVID story. I could tell you all the same things that you're going to hear from a lot of people today. I could tell you how my blood pressure was really high and then it was really low. I could tell you how my pulse was 16. I could tell you how I can't get screened for cancer now. It would all sound really horrible. It is really horrible. But there are a lot of people that can't be here because they are so sick that they cannot travel. I want to tell you about Amy, who is currently fighting her 7th COVID infection and can't access Paxlovid because the government has decided it was no longer approved under an emergency use authorization, and it is $1,600. And it can only be filled every 6 months with insurance. And people with long COVID are so broke that we can't afford tampons, let alone Paxlovid. We are relying on GoFundMe. And most of that crowdfunding is coming from other people in the long COVID community who are also fucking broke. I want to tell you about Dave, who was completely devastated by medical debt. And I'm pretty sure would have been here if he'd had the energy to. Who is more passionate about most of this than half the people that I've talked to in my time in the long COVID community. I want to tell you about Winnie, whose very limited energy is spent propping up other people and trying to make sure that people are aware of what this is doing to our bodies. I want to tell you about Deb, who has spent the last 4 years dealing with long COVID, and it is absolutely horrifying. And now she is terrified that her husband may be infected. I want to tell you about Boo, who may not realize it, but has been such a massive support for me just by showing up and helping keep spaces open on some of the worst days. There are people in California, in Nevada, in New York that I have never met in person and are dealing with so much more. And I know that those are things that I am going to deal with. But they show up and they support people in this community, knowing that we all have very limited time. And our government is doing nothing for them. So I think their stories matter more than mine. And I want to be sure today that I am a voice for them because they could not be here. And I want to be sure that our government knows that we need antivirals now and not in a year, not in 10 months, not eventually, now. We need N95 mandates in healthcare. Not for some people, not for providers, for everyone, now. We need universal health care that actually covers health care now. I don't want to hear that we can't do it. I have a 2.5-inch mass in my right breast, and I've had it for years. And I'm 31, and I can't get a screening until I'm 40, and I have called everybody, and they tell me I can't get screened. That's bullshit. We need funding for telehealth. We're too sick to leave home. And it's not safe to go into hospitals. Fund this shit. I'm talking directly to Congress. What the fuck is wrong with you? This has gone on long enough. People are dead. People are dying. We don't have time to fuck around. Get your shit together and do something about it.
Our next speaker will be Paul Hennessy, a long COVID patient ally and one of our organizers, talking about the importance of allyship. Importance of allyship.
Hi, I want to thank Dara for spearheading this and all of you who donated and supported. To all of you who want to be here but who can't physically travel, I pray I can do you all justice. You're going to hear from a lot of people with long COVID today, but as an ally, I'm here to speak to the general public who have since moved on for the pandemic, and I'm asking for help. Folks, you're being lied to about the scale of this situation. We're being told COVID is now mild, you only need to isolate for 1 day, and that we have the tools to fight it, when that's anything but the truth. They gave us lackluster vaccines and sent us on our way. So we must push back in solidarity and demand more. I continue to wear this respirator, not just to protect myself, but others too. Wearing a respirator is a sign of solidarity for our medically vulnerable and disabled neighbors, which could also be you if you've had a recent COVID infection. It seems somewhere along the line, many of my even most liberal friends lost the plot on community care. Now, I've heard every ableist excuse in the book to ignore this ongoing pandemic. I'm vaccinated. I can't think about it anymore. I got to live my life. None of which are reasonable grounds to ignore this fast-growing crisis. This head-in-the-sand strategy is failing. Conditions caused by COVID, such as blood clots, bone marrow loss, damaged immune system, dementia, Parkinson's, etc., are coming for all of us. Make no mistake, long COVID can happen to anyone, even if you're vaccinated. And it's not rare. Each reinfection is a risk, but society has sacrificed the most vulnerable in exchange for indoor dining. The lack of safe public spaces is a civil rights issue. We can turn this around, but we have to start caring. The stories of long COVID you hear are only the tip of the iceberg. I implore everyone to listen to people with long COVID. I ask you to fight for them because so many can't fight for themselves. Seek out their stories, get involved, donate to places like PolyBio, fight for clean indoor air and better treatments, stand up for communities of color who aren't getting the medical support or the drug trials they need. These long COVID warriors, and all of us by extension, have been abandoned by Congress, the WHO, NIH, and HHS. We've been abandoned by the media, who doesn't want to report on the long-term effects. We've been abandoned by HICPAC, who refuses to recommend respirators in healthcare and keep disabled people safe. We've been abandoned by the CDC, who ignored the fact that COVID can be contagious for 20 days and decided to reduce the isolation to 1 day, and who downplays the effects of clean indoor air and what this virus does to children. We've been abandoned by CDC Director, maskless Mandy Cohen, who in the face of 2,000 COVID deaths per week this year said nothing but wash your hands. And we've been abandoned by President Biden, who has never once said the words long COVID. Mr. President, this is a security risk to our military, a risk to our medical staff, a risk to our pilots, air traffic controllers, children, educators. I could go on. Treat this like the emergency it is. There's a massive crisis of people being reinfected who don't realize the damage that's being caused to them because we have been successfully gaslit by leaders. COVID is fusing brain cells, viral reservoirs hiding out in bone marrow, yet we're being told that it's nothing more than a cold and it no longer rules our lives. It's not a cold, never was. Mild viruses don't cause disability at this scale. COVID hasn't changed. Its perception has been just manipulated by our leaders. And as bad as it is here in America, this is a global crisis that's also being ignored by other countries. Many of the same senators who held the long COVID hearing also agreed to slash COVID funds, voted to ban mask mates on public transit, got rid of telehealth, cut science funding, and have yet to pass anything that fights this disease. Members of the public, don't turn your backs on this disease like they have. So once again, I call on everyone to demand more from our government and public health. Listen and elevate the stories of those with long COVID. You'll hear stories of careers destroyed, crushing debt, relationships ending, being forced into homelessness, and suffering and pain. Those stories are a warning of what's to come for all of us if we don't immediately act. So fight for clean indoor air in forced congregate settings. Demand your local school and workplaces push HEPA filters and upgraded ventilation. Fight for masks in healthcare. Push for $28 billion in annual funding to prevent and treat this disease. Demand repurposed and novel antivirals and immunotherapies. Tell your reps you want a congressional investigation into Mandy Cohen and the CDC. We need help on the local, state, and federal level. Ask what you can do to get involved. No amount of energy helping is too small. But if you don't do anything else at all, At the very least, wear your fucking mask. Thank you.
Reminder, we are trying to keep speeches to 5 minutes, which is hard when we're all very angry and passionate. Our next speaker is Devin Russell, a documentarian who suffers from long COVID and is one of the founders of the Long COVID Foundation.
Hi, everyone. Took the long way up. It's nice to see you here at the Lincoln Memorial for this worthy cause. I can't help but share a sense of camaraderie, knowing we're all in this together. I just passed my 4-year anniversary with long COVID, and while it's unfortunate, I'm still sick. I'm not happy about it. My immune system is definitely annoyed much more than I am. Unfortunately, I'm not new to chronic illness. I suffered from chronic Lyme disease for 11 years, where I was passed around from doctor to doctor, was gaslit, faced inconclusive testing, and took treatments that didn't resolve my malady. I received diagnoses such as ME/CFS and fibromyalgia based on my symptoms. And does that sound familiar? Yeah, this is a story I would hear from time to time while managing an integrative chronic illness center clinic. It's not new that the chronically ill have been ignored and not treated properly. And it's the same with long COVID, at a more massive scale. I would go on to recover and started playing in 2 basketball leagues, working out, working long hours, and my excellent health came to a screeching halt in March of 2020 when I contracted SARS-CoV-2. These past 4 years have been a relentless battle, and it continues today. In fact, right now I have a kidney stone. You could probably tell from my eyes I'm not getting a lot of sleep. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm still taking a prescription drug to help with my inflammation in my brain. Otherwise, if I don't take it, it locks up in a vice grip. There were many times where I thought I would not make it. I was that sick. I experienced horrific neurological issues where I couldn't control my limbs, had to focus to make sure I was even breathing, and couldn't drive. I'm quite sure I had Guillain-Barré syndrome, but I didn't go to the hospital to find out. There were also spells of vomiting, insomnia. I put my keys in my fridge. That took a while to find. And was just sick with 170 plus symptoms. And there are tens of millions of us in the United States alone with long COVID, and many more around the world. So I'm far from alone. This is unacceptable. I've lived through chronic Lyme and saw what the chronically ill had to endure firsthand. We don't want another situation similar to chronic Lyme and how it's called post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome, even though it's a chronic pathogen. Vagueness is never the answer for the chronically ill. The onus should not be thrust back onto the patient instead of where it should be with the poor testing and treatments and the medical system that doesn't help us find and address our root causes. Long COVID is unique and needs to be dealt with as such. Each day that passes, it seems more likely long COVID largely involves COVID and spike persistence. Persistence needs to be thoroughly explored, especially by the NIH, and that is not happening right now. Priority number 1 should be repurposed antivirals and immunotherapies. Thank you. At the Long COVID Foundation, we are working on bringing awareness, advocacy, and action. Being here today is a step towards bringing awareness towards long COVID. But unfortunately, there are so many who aren't even aware of the term, never mind the life-changing capabilities of the disease. LCF is advocating for improved testing, trials, and treatments. All avenues need to be explored, but given COVID's persistence, We want to ensure that this receives necessary attention and is not overlooked, like it has been before with other diseases. There currently isn't a commercial viable test for COVID persistence. The trials being run are utterly insufficient, and the treatments are not good enough for acute COVID or chronic COVID. We need novel antivirals now. Excess COVID, long-term illness, and death may not go away without it. LCF is working to promote safer environments from airborne pathogens, which includes COVID. Schools, hospitals, and public areas should have proper filtration systems installed. Systems that could save districts and businesses money in the long run. So why isn't the government pushing for these common sense, passive participation, win-win things? Mitigation of COVID should be a priority. The children need to be protected. In addition to my work at the Long COVID Foundation, I'm working on a documentary/docuseries called Castaways. You may have seen my RV out front. I drove it here this morning. I'm traveling in the United States and Canada, interviewing COVID long haulers, researchers, doctors, and others regarding long COVID and all things related to the pandemic. Long COVID is such an enormous problem that it needs a spotlight put on it. In wrapping up, as I'm sure I'm over the 5-minute mark, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to you all. Your advocacy, your perseverance, your voice are all invaluable to making a difference. And remember, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, the best way to predict the future is create it. Don't let others who don't have our best interest in mind form our future. Let's go create it. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. Next up is Dr. Sean Mullen. Dr. Mullen has authored over 50 published papers in the interdisciplinary fields of behavioral medicine, aging, health tech, psychology, mental health, and public health. While Dr. Mullen's own research has not directly focused on SARS-CoV-2, his lab's work has been significantly impacted by the pandemic, leading him to explore the cognitive effects of the virus and its implications for exercise and health. Dr. Mullen is a prominent voice in the advocacy for long COVID awareness. He is committed to being a sounding board for all who are affected, seeking to understand and amplify voices in the ongoing conversation about this condition. He is here not just as a scientist, but as a passionate advocate. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Sean Mullen.
Good morning, fellow advocates and distinguished guests. It's an honor to be here. Today we stand at a crossroads in our nation's history, gathered at the Lincoln Memorial, a symbol of unity and resilience. We are here not just as individuals, but as a collective voice, demanding action, demanding change, demanding hope, more hope. For over 23 million Americans living with an invisible, yet relentless enemy, SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID and long COVID. In the midst of the pandemic that continues to reshape the very fabric of our lives, demanding our attention. Long COVID, a condition as complex as it is debilitating, affects millions, sparing no community, no family, no individual. It is not just a health crisis, it is a national emergency. A threat to our national security and a challenge to the foundational pillars of our society. While I may not share the direct experience of those with long COVID, my journey as a health scientist and advocate has shown me the profound impact of the condition on cognitive functioning, on families, and in dreams destroyed. My work in health behavior change and health technology and the fight for clean air in schools and hospitals is a testament to the belief that together we can overcome even the greatest of challenges. Our collective goal is to halt the forward transmission of SARS-CoV-2 and to advocate for effective antiviral treatments for long COVID, recognizing its diverse and complex manifestations. We stand united against the mental health gaslighting that undermines our efforts to prevent the virus and the delusion of long COVID as psychosomatic. Together we strive for a future where both the physical and neurological impacts of this virus are acknowledged, understood, and effectively addressed. Today on Long COVID Awareness Day, we echo the demands laid out by LCAP, the Long COVID Advocacy Project. We call for the declaration of Long COVID as a national emergency, for substantial funding towards novel antiviral research and treatment for viral persistence, for nationwide tracking of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater, for laws ensuring clean air to prevent transmission, for equitable access to care and support for all those affected. We cannot be silent about the staggering number of 5.3 million children who have experienced long COVID. This is not only a silent killer, but a silent disabler. By addressing the disability caused by this chronic disease, we are taking a stand to protect our children's future and prevent further loss of life. Further, we must educate our school administrators, staff, teachers, students, and parents about COVID prevention and mitigation. There are models for success for improving our air quality standards from countries like France, and brilliant online certifications like the 7-hour COVID safety for schools out of Australia that counters the misinformation we're constantly fed here in our country. As we clean our water to eliminate disease, we must clean our air with the same intention and effect. At this juncture, I urge each of you, look up your state and received how much they received from the CARES Act to facilitate your local COVID response to clean the air. It's disheartening to note that a lot of that funding still remains unused, and only a small minority of districts have realized that an ounce of prevention against an airborne pathogen is worth a pound of cure. Research shows that 70% of transmission occurs within the schools, 85% of children hide their illness, while the CDC continues to ignore their own science to remove safeguards like quarantine guidance from 10 days to 5 to just 1. Extended sick pay is gone for most employees across this country. This is not just a failure of policy, it is a failure of moral responsibility. We demand action, we demand research, we demand clean air, we demand justice. And we will not rest until our voices are heard, until our demands are met, because together we are stronger, together we can make a difference. As we gather here in the shadow of Abraham Lincoln, let us remember his resolve, his dedication to justice and equality. In his spirit, we must forge a path forward, a path that honors the millions affected by long COVID, a path that leads to healing, to hope, to future where no one is left behind. So let us take these demands and leave here today with not just a sense of urgency, but with a commitment to action. Let us pledge to support the LCAP demands, to advocate for clean air, to advocate for SARS-2 antivirals, for $28 billion annually, and to ensure that the future is brighter for all those affected by long COVID. Together we can turn the tide. We can heal this nation. Together we can find a cure. It is a time to break the silence surrounding long COVID, to speak out, to act with unwavering determination, be loud against the silence, take power, fight together, and win. Thank you.
Looks like these signs are holding up just about as good as our immune systems. Next, we have Dr. Michael Moran, a long COVID patient, patient advocate, and integrative healthcare practitioner.
I was hoping you would all join me in taking a moment, maybe 10, 15 seconds, to think of those who can't be with us today and everyone else invisibilized by the ableist pandemic policies. Thank you. Thank you. Weeks after my first SARS-2 infection, I developed cognitive issues, constant dizziness, shooting pains, post-exertional malaise, and postural hypotension. My first seizure was the exclamation point at the end of a month-long COVID migraine after my second SARS-2 infection. Through pacing and staying in bed, I learned that I could manage some of my symptoms. After 2 years of doctor's visits, I was finally diagnosed with post-acute sequelae of COVID. Despite being on a cocktail of stabilizing drugs, I still experience all of my long COVID symptoms and sleep most of the day. As an acupuncturist and herbalist, I have helped myself and others with long COVID, but only in small ways. If there were a cure through acupuncture supplements, I would not have long COVID. The reason I'm here is to talk about viral persistence. We used to think viral persistence was rare until January 23, when Ghaffari and Lithgow's team found a high incidence of patients remaining infectious via nasopharyngeal swab for at least 2 months. Then, David Walt's team found circulating spike in patients up to a year after infection, indicating active replicating reservoirs in long COVID patients. It was during this time the White House announced that they beat COVID and would end the emergency declaration. They kicked 23 million people off Medicaid and other increasingly necessary services as more of us became disabled. Last month, Fargo and McComsey's team proposed that the bone marrow reservoirs found in SARS-2 convalescents are hijacking the innate immune system by infecting hematopoietic stem cells. SARS-2 infected macrophages take residence in organs throughout the body for months, causing JAK-STAT-dependent inflammation, mitochondrial, and metabolic dysfunction. What this means is our immune systems and our bodies are really struggling, and we are deathly tired all the time. Right now, David Petrino is trialing HIV antivirals that have shown promise as CCR5 antagonists for long COVID. Michael Peluso is studying reservoirs in people living with long COVID and influencing clinical trials of monoclonal antibodies and combination antiviral drugs. These are the kinds of studies and trials that should have been done years ago by the NIH and industry partners. Infection-associated chronic illness is not new. There are tens of millions not with us today, including those disproportionately affected by severe long COVID. Women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, our trans loved ones. Subject to continual SARS-2 reinfection, anyone could meet a similar fate within the next few years, be it long COVID, COVID-induced Parkinson's, and dementia, heart disease, kidney disease. Millions more families will be forced into poverty and houselessness due to disability, while the U.S. government funds universal health care and housing in already wealthy countries. What we need is nothing short of a warp speed initiative approving Social Security and medications for long COVID. That must include cash in the hands of every person the government disabled. Every person the government chose to disable and chose to abandon during an ongoing pandemic. Worse than abandon, the White House directed the CDC, employers, schools, and hospitals to violate the Public Health Services Act and the ADA, an outright attack on civil rights. To those in power deluded by corporatist and election-driven efforts to minimize SARS-2 and long COVID and defend this brutalist experiment, you will never hear the end of this. Stop destroying lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Next up, we are going to have Julie Lamb alongside the team of Mask Together America.
Hi. As you can tell, I have never done this before. I'm very nervous, but I'll do my best. Thank you, Long COVID DC March, for this chance to speak. My name is Julie Lamb. I'm a writer who initiated Mask Together America. Since 2020, we have been a COVID advocacy group raising awareness. I lost friends to COVID early in the pandemic. That's how I knew SARS-2 is a dangerous virus. Rain or shine, even during the shutdown, I double masked and took portraits of thousands of masked people to raise awareness to support mitigation. I grieved by taking action. Today, I want to share my story to help people see one important fact. Vax and relax is wrong. The CDC's mitigation strategy is wrong. In 2021, I got vaccinated as soon as it was available because I have IgAN and autoimmune disorder. The second COVID shot triggered an abnormal overreaction of my immune system, causing a relapse, inflammation of my kidneys, and hematuria. Sadly, the vaccines didn't protect me from an infection. In April 2021, if you guys still remember, President Biden announced fully vaccinated people may unmask for outdoor gatherings. When Omicron hit, our government kept saying the new strain was mild. Dr. Fauci told the world in November the families with 2 doses can feel good about gathering for the holidays. But I caught COVID at a Christmas gathering that year, infected by a vaccinated relative who showed no symptoms. I was sick for nearly a month and developed incurable conditions. The experience was nothing like a flu. 5 nights of insomnia, shortness of breath. I couldn't breathe when I lay down. Burning pain in my back came from my kidneys. My kidneys got inflamed from both the infection and a booster I took right after Christmas. My nephrologist, who lost his mom to COVID, took my calls on New Year's Eve, thank God. He got me medication and Paxlovid, sparing me from hospitalization. Later, learning about that millions of people died worldwide from this wave, I cried. A couple of months later, while I was driving, I suddenly felt shooting pain in my eyes. I pulled over in the middle of traffic in Manhattan. I was scared. I started to feel very tired every day. My eyes flare out constantly when I work on my computer. I wake up with sore eyes as if I hadn't slept. My primary care sent me to specialists, including sleep doctors, an ophthalmologist, a neurologist, 2 cardiologists, and an endocrinologist. I had 2 sleep studies. And after waiting for half a year to see a sleep doctor, I was diagnosed with sleep apnea caused by COVID. The ophthalmologist said I have severe dry eyes. After 2 years, my nephrologist tested me for Sjogren's. That's how I finally got a diagnosis for my long COVID eyes. And now I see a rheumatologist who said lots of her patients shared my experience. Is the nightmare over now I have been diagnosed? No. Neither condition can be cured. My kidneys lost function. My kidney condition went from stage 1 to stage 2. One medication I need costs over $15,000 a month. My insurance won't cover it. So I signed up for an experimental medical trial, which I have to inject around my belly every week. My rheumatologist fought to get insurance to cover a nose spray to treat my eyes. The med, which costs $600 per month, gives me insomnia. I am a vaccine advocate. I cannot get another COVID booster because of my autoimmune disorder. I share my story today because many people are being gaslit. Patients are getting bounced around in this giant, horrible healthcare maze, lost, exhausted, not being cared for. Instead of educating Americans about using all the tools to prevent COVID, the CDC cut isolation. Viral-laden particles are rampant in poorly ventilated public spaces. We need building codes that regulate indoor air filtration and ventilation systems to reduce airborne pathogens. We need masking. We need masking, especially in healthcare and transportation. We need a COVID awareness campaign. It's long overdue. CDC should feature long haulers to encourage people to vaccinate, wear a mask, and isolate. Unfortunately, because our government hasn't publicized about long COVID, most people don't know that COVID can cause lasting damage to most of our organs. If Americans learn the truth causing the death, and that COVID can trigger a wide array of chronic diseases, most likely they will take precautions. If our government isn't committed to preventing COVID transmission, it is not committed to ending the long COVID crisis that's mass disabling Americans. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce you to my advisor. The first one is Dr. Marjorie Roberts. Dr. Marjorie Roberts has a doctoral degree in business. As an admin and founding member of Mask Together America, Dr. Marge has been advocating about long COVID since 2020. COVID doesn't discriminate, she taught us. She contracted COVID in March 2020, and it changed her life forever. She could not start a planned life coaching business as her health rapidly deteriorated. She endured organ damage and all kinds of symptoms, including loss of teeth. She faced medical gaslighting, yet she kept moving forward. Dr. Marjorie's signature phrase is, "And yet again, I smile." She never stopped advocating for her fellow long haulers. She shared her story to raise awareness and has been featured in many news articles, including the New York Times and NPR. Please give it to her.
Wow. First of all, giving God all the glory. I must thank Diana, Amy, and Carolyn for throwing me a lifeline when I was drowning in 2020 from COVID-19. Let me thank you all for coming here today. We are all here for a reason, and that reason is to wake up Washington. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, except for myself and others suffering from long COVID. Liberty would mean that I would not have been forced into early retirement because everything that I had worked for my entire life was taken away. Liberty would mean for myself and others, there would be no necessity for action from the government. Liberty would mean that I would be able to be transparent with how COVID has changed my life forever, my entire existence, without having to be shadow banned on all of my social platforms. Justice would mean when I contracted COVID-19 at my place of employment in March of 2020 and chose to resign because COVID had made me sicker than I had ever been in my life. And I had the nerve to file for unemployment, and it was denied. I fought for that unemployment all the way to the Superior Court in Fulton County, located in the not-so-great state of Georgia. And I lost, and was told the reason that I lost because contracting COVID and deciding to resign from a job was not a good reason to resign. Justice would mean the country I raised my hand for and swore to defend would have defended me when a certain individual elected to run this country suggested Clorox would kill the virus that had killed my lifelong friend, Sergeant Gary Mitchell, an 82nd Airborne paratrooper that loved jumping out of perfectly good planes. Justice would mean that the powers that be would listen to myself and others when we apply for disability and we're told to hire a lawyer. In reality, there's nothing in our refrigerators but the light and a stale box of Arm & Hammer baking soda. Those of us suffering from long COVID didn't choose the loss. We did not choose the pain. We cannot just be expected to move forward in life without liberty and justice and the support of the federal government of the United States. We are losing the battle against long COVID because in order for a battle to be fought, it takes determination, resources, communication, strength, and motivation, all of the things that we do not have because our liberty and justice has been replaced by bondage and maltreatment. We are part of a battle that we are forced to retreat from because of fatigue, brain fog, chronic pain, shortness of breath, chest pain, muscle aches, COVID crashes, dizziness, migraine headaches, and hundreds of other debilitating symptoms. Those of you here in Washington may not be engrossed in helping those of us suffering from long COVID, but long COVID will be engrossed in you and your families for generations to come. The government has all the resources needed to help us fight this battle against long COVID, but the lack of diplomacy and choosing to react and not to respond is again not pledging allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In closing, I stand here today. I am the voice for the voiceless, the millions of people like myself that have suffered tremendously because of the lack of compassion or concern of what living every day with long COVID really means. I have been advocating 4 years now. In all honesty, I have seen and heard a majority of things from the government that is buried in the depth of my total soul. In this setting today, I have chosen to share with you, I have given all I have to give. I have spoken my truth on every single platform that I could. I'm tired now. So, as a first in order, I'm stepping aside to establish a place for the second in order. I have been a temporary Band-Aid, and it is time for the healing to begin for my family. And as we do our very best to navigate our new life. I am asking you all to keep fighting. I stand here today, and as I look out over this setting, I can't help but have flashbacks to when a certain individual stood here one night and made me a promise. You broke your promise. Again, I thank everybody all over the world for your support and your love. Thank you.
Hi, it's me again. I want to introduce my advisor, Dr. Robbie Tamargo. Our advisor, Dr. Robbie Tamargo, is a clinical psychologist who practices in Jacksonville, Florida. She works as a primary care behavioral health consultant focusing on treating patients aged 18 to 42 who are fighting PTSD. She has been treating many young people who are struggling with multi-organ system diseases that they developed post-COVID. Besides losing her mom to COVID last year, our frontline hero had COVID 7 times. She became immunocompromised because of COVID-19, and she has been battling long COVID to this day. We are grateful that she can make it here today with us.
Good morning, LCDC. I am Dr. Robbie Tamargo, a primary care clinical psychologist and United States Navy veteran. I was infected with SARS-CoV-2 in early spring 2020 by a physician who was one of my patients. I'm here today to respectfully ask President Biden, Congress, and the CDC to please recognize this moral and economic imperative and stop turning your backs on this global public health crisis known as long COVID. Here is why. More than 90% of long COVID cases started with mild SARS-CoV-2. The first 3 waves were the worst, but Americans are still contracted COVID-19, dying, and developing long COVID today. Scientists, physicians, and at least 7 million Americans, along with untold millions of our voting-aged friends and family members, now know that COVID-19 leaves a profound impact on the brain, known as neuro-COVID. If you love someone who suffers, or you suffer with the most common symptom, colloquially called brain fog, Please join me in educating others about our reality. Firstly, it is not brain fog if it continues once you've recovered from COVID. It's neuro-COVID. Since the pandemic began, if you developed new, persistent memory, comprehension, attention, concentration, reading, writing, or word-finding difficulties, you don't have the invalidating, diminishing term brain fog. You have cognitive impairment of neuro-COVID. If you still have loss or altered taste or smell, you have neuro-COVID. If you have new or worsening headaches, seizures, trouble sleeping, tremors, tingling, muscle spasms, or joint pain, you have neuro-COVID. If you have new onset or the worst episode of your life of depression, anxiety, psychosis, or PTSD, you have neuro-COVID. If you've developed Guillain-Barré syndrome post-COVID, you have neuro-COVID. Mr. President, Congress, and governors, I ask you to please familiarize yourselves with newly published research showing our younger adults aged 18 to 44, which happens to be our military-aged cohort. They are having serious difficulty with memory, concentration, and decision-making, which in my clinical world is known as higher cortical dysfunctioning. They have neuro-COVID. Almost 70 million people around the world are suffering with multi-organ system disease of long COVID. So the people with neuro-COVID are not to be minimized. Please remember the words of President Abraham Lincoln and Dr. Martin Luther King spoken here when I ask you, when you ask us for your votes. I will paraphrase. I, and I believe other long COVID sufferers and their supporters, will stand with anybody that stands right. And we will part with him when he goes wrong. The founding promises of America are freedom, equality, and justice for all. Does this include Americans suffering with long COVID? We need your true leadership in stopping the misinformation that is minimizing the long-term adverse neurological consequences of even a single mild infection. And the even more sinister impact of repeat infection, known as neuro-COVID. Please ensure an honest public health education campaign about the risks of long COVID based on recent well-designed studies by our nation's and the world's scholars. Please provide more funding to expedite approval of effective treatments. There are none. Please provide a streamlined, doable application process for disability that is accessible for all long COVID sufferers, especially those with neuro-COVID. Please provide funding for clean air and ventilation in all public buildings, the least of which are hospitals, dentists and physicians' offices, houses of worship, and every school in America. We need this to protect this nation's future, its brain trust, our children from neuro-COVID. Next, I speak to you personally, President Biden. I grew up the child of a Register of Wills of Cecil County. You know where that is. As an ardent supporter of you, she contracted a fifth infection of COVID-19 in April 2023, causing her to be stricken with Guillain-Barré syndrome. Despite being fully vaccinated and boosted, she died in May 2023. All of my life, Mr. President, she told me stories of meeting you. I was just a little girl, and I admired you from her stories. She admired and respected you fervently. I have your election memorabilia all over my house as proof. Please don't abandon her. I am the fourth of 5 generations of those who proudly served in the armed forces of the United States of America. Mr. President, I know you care about the protection of our military and veterans. They need you to protect their careers and ensure appropriate mental health care, especially in the smaller branch clinics. They need proper diagnosis of long COVID so they can receive necessary disability compensation when they are no longer permitted to serve because of the mysterious symptoms that are in their heads. Oh yeah, it is in their heads. It's neuro-COVID. Thank you.
Here, I want to introduce you to Dr. Angelique Corthos. She's Associate Professor for Pathology, Biomedicine, and Epidemiology, Biological and Forensic Anthropology at CUNY John Jay College of Criminal Justice. She also works with Doctors Without Borders as a consultant on diagnosis, treatment, and vaccine healthcare and medicine for all. Dr. Corthos received 2 National Science Foundation grants to study COVID-19. We are grateful to have a biochemical scientist who knows the danger of this very unusual virus as our speaker today. Hi, everybody. So honored to be here and talk to you a little bit about, the problem with long COVID. First of all, I want to talk about public health is about educating people on diseases and prevention for the benefit of all, not just the privileged few who don't have comorbidities, right? It should not fall on the vulnerable to carry the burden of prevention on their shoulders. Politics should never enter science, and especially not public health. The CDC should never be directed by interest other than that of the well-being of everyone. We do not demand mandates and restriction. We demand education and the truth that COVID is still circulating unchecked, the truth that we have the means to mitigate without restrictions, the truth that COVID is not a cold, it's not the flu, but a dangerous, debilitating, chronic disease-causing virus. And the truth that you cannot talk about herd immunity when 1,000 people die every month and thousands more get long COVID. We do not ask that people be restricted in their social life. We do not ask that they be restricted in their everyday lives. But we ask that they be given all the tools to make the best decisions for their health and that of their community, because an educated person is a force for good. We demand that our emergency tools be improved and that research be funded for the treatment of long COVID and for better prevention of future pandemics that we know are going to come. We demand to evolve and not regress to a past that will never be the same. And now I'm going to go in a little bit of a tangent, but hold with me here. H.G. Wells, in his Time Machine, wrote about a world in a state of absolute permanency, maintained with an iron fist by corporations so that slowly but surely the population no longer has to think for itself. He wrote, "There is no intelligence where there is no change and no need to change." We here do not demand to settle for absolute permanency, the absolute permanency of repeated COVID infection. We are intelligent and strong, and we demand change. It is intelligent to wear a mask. It is intelligent to have clean air in public spaces. It is intelligent to share a vaccine, treatment, and diagnostic technology with all. It is intelligent and essential to fund research for long COVID. As many once stood here demanding AIDS treatment, so do we stand now for long COVID and demand recognition. We demand treatment, not erasure. We demand mitigations, not infections. Thank you. I think the storm is here with us. The storm is coming and bringing change. We are going to speak up together for change. Now I would like to introduce you to Dr. Linda Green. Dr. Linda Green is a retired internist and medical oncologist. She's active member of the American Public Health Association, grandmother of 6, member of PAN-ANDID and COVID Safe Maryland, also medical advisor of Mask Together America.
Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I've had the real privilege of working with Mask Together America, PanEnded, COVID Safe Maryland, the American Public Health Association, and a number of struggles over my lifetime. Their work with the most recent groups of disability activists has informed much of what I want to share today. Also, my years of activism have convinced me that we have to build a broad, multiracial, and militant movement that brings in all parts of the working class. Fighting for disability justice, just like fighting racism, benefits everyone. All people can contribute skills and experience to building a better society. So why does this not happen? It is impossible to discuss long COVID mitigation, and treatment without understanding how capitalism views healthcare for the majority of the population. First of all, capitalism operates above all to generate profit for the ruling class of industrialists and financiers. To this end, it needs people to be just healthy enough to work for them and to fight their wars. Those who are most valuable to their system receive better health insurance and programs to keep them healthy. If it was up to the capitalists, there would be no need to take care of chronically ill people, people with disabilities, long COVID patients, and the elderly. But this default position of the ruling class has been challenged by mass movements against racism, war, and poverty. And so the capitalists have grudgingly provided some health care for various groups. The creation of Medicare and Medicaid emerged from the civil rights movement, for example, and included the anti-racist demand of integrating our hospitals. Today as well, anti-racist struggles can be merged with disability justice issues to strengthen our position. Some of us are looking at ways to look at the prison health system and long COVID as well. COVID-19 helped many people understand more about the system's values. Old people, Native Americans, and Black and brown essential workers in transit, education, and healthcare, and many others suffered and died disproportionately. Triage in the emergency room included value judgments about quality of life by doctors and nurses who never knew anything about the patient in front of them. Patients who were old or had disabilities were judged to not have a life worth saving, a statement that echoed the Nazi medicine of Hitler's Germany. I think it's interesting that some folks seem to understand this now, and so when HHS called for comments on Section 504, they actually requested comments on these ethical questions. However, the methods and accessibility limited accommodations in universities and workplaces have become the norm. Tailoring medical practice to include safety measures for COVID and appreciation of the reality of long COVID. Well, shall I say? Okay. I think I'm going to do that last paragraph. Did you get it? I think it's interesting that some folks understand about these ethical concerns. And when Health and Human Services called for comments on Section 5... Shall I wait a minute? Okay. It's pretty exciting, right? We're going to fight back. When people with long COVID are under attack, what do? Fight back. Yes, excellent. Sometimes we stand up, sometimes we don't. Okay? I think it's interesting that some folks in the government seem to realize that these ethical questions are important. When Section 504 requested comment on the type of judgment and triage, there was quite a bit of response. However, the methods and accessibility of SSDI show that this is mostly a sham, as long COVID patients find support in this area to be very difficult and consider a myth. Limited accommodations in the universities and workplaces have become the norm. Tailoring medical practice to include safety measures for COVID and appreciation of the reality of long COVID are surprisingly difficult, as many here can attest. In addition to denying treatment to millions of workers in the United States, the capitalists distort research in the name of profit. The pharmaceutical industry has benefited from payouts and protection for vaccines and pills like Paxlovid. This industry is the most profitable in the United States, But, it's also quite expensive to the capitalists. So therefore, they don't really want to spend too much of that money on people with serious illnesses unless they are very valuable to their system. Research is tailored to creating treatments for diseases that affect large numbers of people that may have many things less severe than long COVID, but where there is profit to be made. Mitigating COVID risk for the population with improving ventilation in schools and offices is an expense not worth it to the capitalists because workers can be replaced. They also think there will be enough children to provide a new generation of workers and soldiers. Research funding and pharmaceutical solutions constitute another fight which many of us have been involved in. There is one more dimension to the struggles against capitalism. This is in the international arena where regular people all over the world are struggling against imperialism. While the ruling classes fight over oil and other resources, the working classes suffer. The genocide in Gaza is the most current example, and the disability from injury, malnutrition, and infectious disease, including COVID, are horrific. The profiteering seen in the COVID vaccine rollouts was most obvious in the fact that rich countries had it and others did not. Protests of the World Trade Organization went unheeded. Building international solidarity for health is a critical agenda point. So the fight for a world where resources are shared, all are valued, equity is the rule, and everyone has a chance to contribute is a huge task. Broadening the struggle to include disability justice, along with the fights against racism and sexism and ageism, are important to win reforms and ultimately revolutionary change. Today, this event is a move in the right direction. Thank you.
Before we switch to another video, we have an impromptu update from Marie Volater.
Hey, y'all. All right. We all know we're here to make some noise, but let's also take this moment to organize. Take out your phones, start emailing longcovid@hhs.gov. I met with the Secretary of Health and Human Services yesterday, and he thanked me for making a smooth transition from COVID to the flu. I did not consent to that. We all have stories to tell. Our stories have power. Share your story with this email address. Tell them how your life is impacted. Share a before and after photo. Share about your financial situations. Share your truth. And take every damn moment you have to bring one more person into the movement, one more person into taking action. Because it is only through collective action that we can make change. Email longcovid@hhs.gov.
Are we moving to a situation that life looks normal, but we just don't know the long-term ramifications of this virus?
We need to treat it as the national emergency it is.
The numbers are staggering, actually, from NIH. Staggering.
We have evidence of minor variants in the brain that we did not detect in the respiratory tissue, suggesting that ongoing viral replication does take place in the brain and that there actually is some evolution of the virus.
It's now been shown that this virus goes into a thing called monocytes, deep into the bone marrow.
One of the central drivers of long COVID is the persistence of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in patients' tissue sites.
We found presence of raw RNA in eye tissues.
We have multiple papers showing clear-cut evidence of viral persistence.
Declare long COVID a national emergency.
There are studies where SARS-CoV-2 has been found in the tissue of children, and the majority of them had just silent viral RNA. And what does that even mean? It's silent now, I guess, but in a few years, who knows what would happen to them?
This virus resides in the body in every vital organ for months and months and months.
It affects people of all ages and all backgrounds. In other words, if you're under the impression that once you've gotten COVID, you don't need to worry about it ever again, you are mistaken.
Declare long COVID a national emergency.
The virus that persists, or genomic sequences that persist, have known long-term consequences.
I mean, the one I immediately think of course, is HIV. It's almost impossible to eradicate it.
Plague! We are in the middle of a fucking plague! And you behave like this!
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID.
Look, we've seen the progress that has been made.
$1.15 billion already spent in the NIH, and we've got nothing for it. And the status quo has left us with absolutely nothing over the last 4 years. Absolutely nothing.
There is still not a focus and a treatment that's being studied for Black patients.
You keep throwing all this money away at everything. Has anyone planned? Does anyone have a plan at NIH? NIH is a joke.
Declare long COVID a national emergency. $28 billion now.
The NIH and government agencies need to invest way, way, way more money into long COVID, into research, into clinical care, into clinical trials.
There's no amount of public investment in trying to search for cures. There's no amount that's overdoing it.
According to David Cutler, over the next 5 years, long COVID could cost the U.S. economy $3.7 trillion. And the data right now is shocking. When you're seeing a 4-year timeline of long COVID, and the CDC reports there's over 5,000 deaths associated with that, that means we need antivirals right now. And we need $28 billion from Congress annually for research to get this done.
Why are all the fights left to the activists? Why do we have to do all the fights? Why do we have to fight your fights?
Up next, we've got Armani Guerra, who's a member of the military disabled by long COVID.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I didn't come here expecting to deliver a speech. I came from North Carolina with my wife. Just to clarify, I'm a former member of the military, so I left the military after 7 years of service in 2022 as a captain. I served in the 2nd Infantry Division, the 82nd Airborne Division. Yeah. I say this not because I want to be recognized for my service, but just to demonstrate that this disease can happen to absolutely everyone. So I transitioned from the service. I did get COVID while in the service. And I had some long COVID symptoms, and they slowly resolved themselves. But with my second infection in August of 2023, it felt like a cold, and I developed the very debilitating long COVID symptoms that I still suffer from to this day. I'm a little symptomatic right now, so just bear with me. So something I want to stress is that I was what many consider to be, peak fitness, very driven, a leader in both my military service and then my my career after the military. I too thought in 2021, actually I was in DC visiting an old Army buddy whose sister was a provider at a long COVID clinic, that when she was telling me these stories of these folks suffering, I was like, wow, that's absolutely terrible. But in my head, I thought, well, I'm physically fit, healthy, a male, and young. And so this couldn't possibly happen to me. And so while I felt sympathy inside for those who are suffering, I never thought that I'd be in this situation today. What I want to really drive, and it's really to the people who are walking around our demonstration here, is that if it can happen to me, it can happen to you, it can happen to your parents, your siblings, your sons, your daughters, and your friends. I've endured a lot of mental and physical stress in my life from my time in the service. I've been able to push through a lot. And frankly, this is not something that you're able to just push through. Thank you. I used to think that fatigue, I used to think that I knew what the word fatigue meant. I used to think that, you know, if you were just chronically fatigued, maybe you could just push through it if you tried. But I pushed through a lot of pain, physical pain in my life, and frankly, this surpasses all of that. The harder you push, the more it drags you down. I went from being able to run all the miles, lift all the weights, experience life, to effectively being bedbound or restricted to my apartment for these last few months. And like many long COVID sufferers, I experienced medical gaslighting. I experienced coming $13,000, $14,000 out of pocket so far. I've searched and scoured the depths of the internet looking for a cure that does not exist. And I felt alienated by my country and by society. I want to drive something that I think absolutely hinders the progression of this movement, and it's the fact that when the word COVID is said out loud, it is immediately met with some form of political resistance. This is not a politics issue. This is a human issue. This is a health issue. It doesn't not matter what form of thought in terms of the political spectrum that you lie on, because it can still affect you. And I would absolutely hate for you, and I speak to you in general out there, people walking around from this demonstration, to find yourself in a position like many of us and be met with the same barriers to receiving expedient, affordable, and equitable care when it comes to long COVID. Thank you. I promised to keep this short. I did not have a speech prepared. I felt very passionate to try to get involved. If those around us could do anything, if you're not driven to becoming a part of the movement, or providing funds, or providing your time and effort to supporting this, I at least ask that you are made aware of this situation, that you accept that this is a real illness and a real disease that can affect anyone, and just talk about it. Because frankly, awareness will eventually drive collective action. And that's absolutely everything I wanted to say. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for being here. Thank you for those who told your stories. It was absolutely inspiring, especially those who traveled so far and have dealt with so much. You matter, you're visible. I genuinely care about you. There's many people in the community who care about you. And if you ever need anything, reach out, right? The last plug I will say is that I had the opportunity to speak on a long COVID podcast 2 weeks ago. It's fairly new. They just released their first episode. It's a long hauler from Canada who's effectively been bedbound since March 2020. And so I want to give a shout out to Noelle, who's running that podcast, and her podcast is called the Lost Voices of Long COVID. Lost Voices of Long COVID. So give it a follow, and Thank you once again. I really appreciate it.
Hey guys, feeling? We're close. We're close. Up next, I want to introduce Joaquin Beltram, long COVID ally, founder of the ACE Coalition, and is leading a movement to get respirators back in healthcare. Give it up for Joaquin.
The people united will never be defeated. 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 LCDC. My name is Joaquin Beltran. I am from Los Angeles. I am honored to be here. I want to thank the organizers, Dara, Renee, Paul, Devin, for all your work in putting this together. I, as a former staffer for Biden, I want to send him a selfie, if you will indulge me in this. And I want to say, and if you'll join me in saying, President Biden, ACE long COVID. President Biden, ACE long COVID. President Biden, ACE long COVID. That's it, President Biden. Take action. So where is President Biden? Where is he? Why is he not here? Why is he not funding resources for long COVID? I am calling on President Biden to fund prevention, to fund treatments, to fund financial support, to one, prevent long COVID from the get-go, because that is how you prevent long COVID. Preventing COVID is how you prevent long COVID. And then we need to make sure that everyone has the resources for treatments, for financial support. As people are being evicted or on the edge of being evicted, as people can't afford just basic treatments. It's an election year. He's pitting a health versus economy dichotomy. A health versus economy dichotomy. That is wrong. We all know that it's health and the economy. That is how you have a people that are healthy, that are not getting further disabled, a people that can afford to pay for rent, that can work. When people are dying at 2,000 per week here in the United States, and that's an undercount because we are not testing like we used to, we are not out of the pandemic. I'm calling on President Biden to end his pandemic denialism. Where are our taxpayer dollars going? They're going to weapon manufacturers. We are funding a genocide instead of funding prevention, funding treatment, funding financial support. That is our money. That is our money. Why should it go towards harming innocent Palestinians instead of funding our families, our people, our communities? Instead of American Hellfire missiles, we need to be investing in affordable health care for everyone, and especially for long COVID patients, as you've heard earlier today, who are paying exuberant amounts that they cannot afford and are putting that into debt. Just like we had an AIDS reckoning because of denialism for 10 years, we are headed towards a long COVID reckoning. As more people die, as more people become disabled, as more people become increasingly disabled. Why isn't Congress funding an Indoor Clean Air Act? An Indoor Clean Air Act that will help with this pandemic and future pandemics and create jobs. Why isn't Congress funding an ACE long COVID pandemic? an ACE Long COVID Act to make sure that we have the treatments, that we have the research, that we have the financial support. It's time for President Biden to act. It's time for Congress to act. We are tired of the pandemic denialism. Thank you to all the organizers here. Thank you to you. Thank you to everyone who is at home, who can't be here, because many are disabled and can't attend here. We have to face reality. We have to fund long COVID research, and we have to save our future. Thank you.
So next, please invite long COVID and HIV activist Daniel Duggar to the stage.
I want to. Oh, no. It's a little too windy out here. Thanks for allowing me to speak. There was no excuse in this time and in this country for the spread of a deadly new epidemic. For this was a time in which the United States boasted the world's most sophisticated medicine and the world's most extensive public health system geared to eliminate such pestilence from our national life. When the virus appeared, the world's richest nation housed the most lavishly financed scientific research establishments, both inside the vast governmental health bureaucracy and in other institutions, to investigate new diseases and quickly bring them under control. And making sure the government researchers and public health agencies did their jobs were the world's most unfettered and aggressive media, the public's watchdogs. People died while public health authorities and the political leaders who guided them refused to take the tough measures necessary to curb the epidemic spread, opting for political expediency over the public health. The preceding are not my words. They are found within the first few pages of And the Band Played On, a powerful book written in 1987 by Randy Shilts, documenting the abhorrent response by our government to the HIV/AIDS crisis. Without question, his observations could easily be applied to the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. With HIV, those in public health were quick to assuage the public's fears concerning who would be at risk, and did so through the creation of a 4-H club to which homosexuals, Haitians, heroin users, and hemophiliacs belonged. Having not learned their lesson, they once again created a 4-H club with SARS-CoV-2. As a consequence of their failure, millions who are not hypertensive, not hyperglycemic, who do not suffer from hypoimmunity, and who do not live with a high BMI, find themselves living with a persistent virus for which there could have been a reliance upon 40 years of evidence-based medicine on September the 28th and 29th of 2020. To preserve the immune competence and cognition of the current and future generation. The consequences of turning a blind eye to that which allows 1.2 million to maintain their autonomy, immune competence, and cognition has led to the reactivation of tuberculosis, an AIDS-defining illness and the #1 cause of death in the HIV-positive population in HIV-negative members of the current and future generation. If we are going to avert the crisis unfolding before our eyes, we must immediately roll out a massive drug repurposing campaign as China did. Failure to do so ignores the fact that distributed throughout the very organs required to excrete and metabolize every single drug class is the very receptor upon which this virus relies, ACE2. In closing, the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, immortalized in marble and sitting behind me once said, "At what point then is the approach of danger to be expected?" I answer, if it ever reaches us, it must spring up amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. Clearly, we chose to be its author. Will we be the finisher? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. We're going to wrap up with Joshua Prabanik, investigative journalist and co-founder of Public Herald, award-winning documentary film director, and founder of LCAP. And while he wraps this up, I'm going to demonstrate what happens when people with long COVID are left with no treatments and no hope.
It's been 3 hours since we started these speeches. One COVID death is happening every 5 minutes in the United States. We've seen 36 people die since the beginning of these speeches because COVID kills, because long COVID kills. And we have a president who has neglected this crisis. We have a CDC who has neglected this crisis. The CDC should be criminally investigated for what they have done to people, for what kind of minimization they've created for COVID. President Joe Biden should also be criminally investigated for not even having the respect to hold, for instance, a long COVID press conference. We're not even caring enough to get us long COVID legislation. Where is our legislation? Where are our antivirals? Where are the antivirals? Over 5,000 people confirmed dead with long COVID, and yet no antivirals. We have an NIH trying to spit out the most nonsense clinical trials you could ever imagine. They know. We've spoken to them. LCAP sat in their room with their scientists. They know viral persistence is real. They know there are blood panels we could be doing right now. There are transcriptomic blood panels that will show you a viral load test with your long COVID. It will show you how much SARS-2 is in your body. SARS-2 persistence is killing people. It's crippling our society. We have demands for the United States. We have demands for President Joe Biden. Those demands were drafted by people within the long COVID community, many of whom could not be here today because they're too ill, they're too debilitated by this disease to be here. But they have come together to find consensus on how to move us forward. And that consensus meant that we need to declare long COVID a national emergency in this country. We spoke with David Cutler, the Harvard health economist. He stated that long COVID is going to cost this U.S. economy $3.7 trillion over the next 5 years. $3.7 trillion. And he said that in order for us to deal with this problem, we should be looking at it at a minimum amount of $28 billion annually. $28 billion annually in legislation to get what we need, to get the treatments we need, to get the social support we need, to get the programs that we need moving forward. LCAP has been lobbying with Congress. We've been lobbying with the Health Committee. We asked to be represented, to make sure our scientists were represented at the HELP hearing. Over 400,000 letters were sent to members of Congress. Over 400,000 letters were sent to the FDA, CDC, NIH, demanding that we had this representation at that HELP hearing so that we heard about viral persistence. We heard about SARS-2 persistence. We heard about novel antivirals. And that became the focal point of that hearing, but it was not the focal point. They wanted to continue to minimize this disease. And we say to them the same thing we said to the people yesterday that we lobbied with. Where are our antivirals? Where are our treatments? Do we need to watch more people die? We are looking at the HIV/AIDS crisis with long COVID. We have the science. ACT UP taught us how to do the activism. We need to rise up together. We need to get direct. We need to create direct action, bring it in front of Congress, take it to the president, take it to everybody here in Washington, D.C., take it to Big Pharma, take it to the banks. We need to show up everywhere we could show up, be as loud as possible. We have to take power and fight back. And LCAP fights back. You know, I would not be here today if it was not for the love and care of my wife, who also is suffering with long COVID. My family. And to everyone out there, we were going to continue to fight for you. We were going to continue to demand antivirals. We were going to continue to demand an emergency is met. And we're going to continue to demand that the funding is met. We're going to continue to demand that there is equality, that the discrimination is ended for both BIPOC plus, LGBTQ plus communities. We can no longer allow our medical system to create this inequality that we're facing, where people get dismissed the way that they have in stories that we've heard. We have to fight for equality as much as possible. We have to. And we need Bernie Sanders to show up for us. Where are you, Bernie Sanders? Where the hell are you? How many more signs we got to make with your face on it till you're out here standing with us? You need to be right here. We're going to have more people in this coffin. More people dying needlessly all across this country. Over 1.1 million now disabled, now killed in the United States. Over 27 million people across the United States with long COVID, with the numbers increasing more and more every year, with infections increasing more and more every year because of the CDC guidelines. So now we've got 1 in 4 people developing long COVID. 25% chance next time you get infected, you'll develop long COVID. You carry that number globally, that's over 275 million people. This is an international crisis. It needs international attention. The United States should be drafting a PEPFAR-type legislation for long COVID, and we should be drafting a Ryan White CARE Act-type legislation for long COVID. We need the funding, and we need antivirals now. Declare long COVID a national emergency. Antivirals now. Declare long COVID a national emergency. $28 billion now. Declare long COVID a national emergency. Long COVID kills. Long COVID kills. Long COVID kills. Antivirals now. LCAP fights back. Love and solidarity to all of you.
Thank you all so much for coming to the first annual LCDC. I know how hard it's been, and we all appreciate all of you taking the effort to come, whether you're a patient, ally, or just want to learn more. We appreciate you watching online, your donations to make this happen. Thank you so much. We're going to play an outro video, but that'll be available online, given, you know, a little windy. But thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to all who helped organize this. For more info on our list of demands, visit lcdcmarch15.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well. Thank you so much. We'll see you next year.
I found out I was pregnant very early on in the pandemic, a couple weeks into lockdown. And I think having 2 small children at the time and being pregnant with my third has really kind of colored my family's decision-making process. I'm advocating for 2 things. One, I would like the United States to align nationally under a clean indoor air legislation that focuses on infection control and adheres to ASHRAE 241, or hopefully even better. We also need to hold schools and their vendors accountable for achieving good, clean indoor air. And that means transparency. So right now, if you're a parent and you're trying to figure out, is the classroom that my kid is in safe? It's very difficult to do that in most places in the country. Even in schools with decent classroom ventilation, a lot of them have chosen not to or couldn't afford to deal with ventilation in larger shared spaces like the multi-purpose rooms, the cafeterias, the bathrooms, the libraries, the gyms. There's a lot of parents like me who also agree that there's an issue here. And so I've been talking to a lot of different parents about how we can align more formally to try to advocate for changes, both at a local level and also nationally as well. For every child and every teacher that's in a school, there's typically a family associated with them. Schools are one of the largest ways that COVID spreads. A lot of people don't want to believe that COVID could be the root cause of whatever other issues their kids are having, because we've been sort of coached into believing by public health that we're just going to have to live with it. Certainly in my own life, I've seen friends constantly complaining, I think we all have, about how their kids are always sick. The family is always sick. And it's not just winter anymore. When your immune system gets knocked by having one illness, then the next illness comes a lot more easily, especially after COVID. I think a lot of people felt sort of betrayed by public health and never really learned that even though cloth masks are not the best solution, there is a really great solution out there, which is, N95 and better respirators. And so this message has been lost on a lot of people, and it's been combined with a message that you'll be just fine getting this however many times a year, that the side effects are quite rare, when that's really not at all the case. The administrators are all trying to figure out how they can improve the absenteeism problem. Clean air is one way that we think can really help that. And if you can get your administrator on board to understanding the cleaner the air, the more mitigations that you have, the healthier the kids will be. The other thing is test scores. So we know that if kids are in dirty air, high CO2 levels, wildfire smoke, they're not going to be performing at their peak, nor will they be performing at their peak if they're ill. So if you're trying to boost test scores, clean air is a great way to frame the opportunity for improved test scores and improved attendance rates. We are living in a different world than we were living in 2019. And we really need to recognize that things are not the same as they were. And we have this health issue that is everywhere. And we should really focus on trying to reduce the impact that this health issue is having on people. And the way to do it is not to pretend that it doesn't exist or to wish it away, but to actually address it. And the number one way that's non-controversial that we have to make that a reality is cleaning the air.
No deben esperar tanto tiempo. La persistencia viral para nosotros es muy evidente. Si bien no es la única causa, pero estimamos que alrededor del 75% de los pacientes con COVID persistente o long COVID tiene persistencia viral. Con la evaluación clínica se puede hacer un diagnóstico de un síndrome de hipoperfusión, hipercoagulidad y microcoágulos, que de manera simplificada denominamos síndrome de HHM, cuya causa más frecuente es una infección persistente que afecta las paredes de los vasos sanguíneos. Y esta evaluación clínica dirigida la hemos simplificado en el test de HHM.
Hi, my name is Dr. Wes Ely, a physician at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm here just to share a few thoughts with you about long COVID and the road that we're on in terms of discovery and finding answers for people who are suffering. Here at our CIBS Center, which stands for CIBS, Critical Illness, Brain Dysfunction, and Survivorship, we try and engage with people who've suffered from an acute illness long after they were expected to have been recovered. We have support groups that meet every day of the week, and we've tried to create a community where people with long COVID and the spouses and family members of those with long COVID can find a place to share and scream and yell and cry and find hope and find healing during these weeks and months. And we're also doing some fairly, I hope, helpful research funded by the National Institute of Aging and National Institute of Health that's going to incorporate a randomized controlled trial to study immunomodulation as a potential treatment for long COVID symptoms. You know, long COVID is a disease state. It's a disease state whereby months after somebody suffered from acute COVID, the person goes on to have organ systems, one or multiple organ systems of the body not working. This can be profound cognitive impairment. Many of you listening have this entity, so I'm not here to tell you what it's about, but cognitive impairment, cardiovascular problems, POTS disease, gastrointestinal problems, ME/CFS, Sjogren's, connective tissue disorders. The list goes on, and I'm so sorry for the way you're suffering. You are the experts of your own illness. You're teaching me every day what this is like, this IACC, this infection-associated chronic condition. And we want to be here as servants to help you find answers. We hope that this REVERSE-LC or RVLC, reverse long COVID clinical trial of baricitinib, which is an FDA-approved drug for COVID, for acute COVID, and also for other diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. We're going to allow people who enroll into our study to be randomized in a double-blind fashion to receive 6 months of either baricitinib or placebo. This will be a very, hopefully, helpful way for us to understand how an immunomodulator might improve the long-term healing process of people with long COVID. This is obviously a devastating public health problem. We are here to try and help and be servants. I myself, Dr. Wes Ely, am the principal investigator of this RVLC trial and one of the co-directors and founders of the CIBS Center here in Nashville, Tennessee. Our website is icudelirium.org. We also are going to have a REVERSE-LC website, but it's not launched yet. By the time you see this, it might be there, so try and look for that. And we hope that you found this interesting and helpful, and that we provide more and more healing and answers through our community and through our investigations as we go along in time. Thank you once again, and I'm sorry for your suffering.
PolyBio is a nonprofit research organization created by two scientists who study the brain and infection. And what we do with our core team and now a growing group of people is we work with teams at different academic institutions, and we conceptualize and build collaborative projects to study root cause drivers of conditions initiated by infection like long COVID. We're doing quite a bit of long COVID research. We started a group called the Long COVID Research Consortium, which is a team of scientists at different academic institutions, actually in several different global locations right now, collaborating on long COVID. And some of the sites include, for example, teams at Harvard Med, at UCSF, at Yale, even the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. And what we're doing is we're sharing ideas, hypotheses, and in some cases, samples as often as possible to do work on patients with long COVID. That includes collecting and studying a wide range of sample types from patients, not just blood, but also a good number of tissue samples from patients like gut tissue or lymph node tissue. And our program also supports some pretty cool, innovative imaging methods so that we can better understand what's happening in patients' brains and bodies. Our consortium wrote a paper in the journal Nature Immunology that details evidence thus far showing that SARS-CoV-2 as a virus is capable of persistence in a wide range of brain and body sites, and in some cases has been found hundreds of days, if not in some cases a year after initial illness in patients with long COVID symptoms. And in that paper, we went on to describe how potentially reservoirs or persistent SARS-CoV-2 could impact a wide range or drive a range of other abnormalities also documented in long COVID patients. So for example, it could contribute to microbiome imbalances in patients. It could drive some of the clotting or other neuroimmune or nervous system problems that patients also have. So there's a lot of potential for continuing to follow what we consider to be a major consideration and growing body of evidence for in the space. The main factors that we're looking at are the straightforward possibility that patients simply just don't fully clear the virus after acute illness, and that a little bit of virus persists in their tissue as a reservoir where it's better protected from the immune response. So that could be a little bit of virus that remains in the lining of the gut or in the lining of the lung or in a different body site. And then that virus or persistent RNA or protein in that body site could drive immune abnormalities, genetic abnormalities, even potentially metabolic abnormalities. We also see that in some long COVID patients, infection with the SARS-CoV-2 virus appears to kick up, or does in some studies, kick up latent infections that the person already harbored. So all humans harbor a certain number of pathogens, for example, like Epstein-Barr virus, or in some cases, even some of the tick-borne or vector-borne pathogens that are usually can sometimes be in a dormant, latent, or just a state where they're not driving symptoms. But if a person gets COVID and that sinks their immune response, it could be an opportunity for those latent pathogens themselves to reactivate and potentially drive new sets of symptoms. So that's another trend we're looking at closely. If patients can continue to tell all key stakeholders, from the government to philanthropists to anyone really in the world with resources, that long COVID, SARS-CoV-2 related chronic consequences to even other conditions, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, and even infections beyond SARS-CoV-2, how all of these topics need much more funding and a much more serious approach by government and even private stakeholders. That's huge. In other words, just keep getting long COVID and the vast range of SARS-CoV-2's chronic consequences on human chronic disease onto the radar of as many people who can make a difference as possible.